You are listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.
The king's like the right man. Imagine like Haman, he's like this, almost like this, if you ever seen Ratatouille, he's a guy who tried to kill the rat. The guy with the long nose and the chef who was just like really creepy looking, but like he just wanted to get rid of the rat because it was in the restaurant. But he didn't know Ratatouille had some skills, mad skills in cooking. And so imagine Haman as that guy with a long nose, kind of maybe has a little circle thingy wart on his face, maybe a bunch of warts on his face. But the king saw him to be favorable. The king actually loved Haman. In the beginning, he thought Haman is like this classic guy. Haman's a really great guy. I want him to be my right man guy. I want him to be the person who does things for me, who tells people what laws I'm decreeing, what laws I'm making. He wants Haman to be just the guy who speaks for him. Now, the king never knew that Haman, like it said in the story, that Haman was plotting against the Jews and trying to kill the Jews. Like, no one knew that. Like, the king didn't know that because he didn't know that the Jews were Esther and Mordecai. But before the story begins, Mordecai did save his life by the two guards who wanted to plot and kill the king. Mordecai did tell Esther, his cousin, and Esther told the king. And that's how he survived. Now, in chapter 4, what's kind of fun, because there's Haman plotting this whole thing, and then you see this picture. Follow me if you can. Imagine this. Mordecai, this Jew, who's Esther's cousin, he heard the plot that Haman wants to kill all the Jews. Who's been here when, I think Erica, or was it Mark that brought sackcloth? Erica? Yeah. Do you guys remember feeling that thing? Like the thing that people put beans in, or like they put potatoes in, the sackcloth? They wore that. Just as they wore in Jonah's time, they wore that. Haman literally wore from head to toe sackcloth. And now it was in that time, so Haman's wearing sackcloth. He goes up to the city gate. Imagine this huge, like 20-foot gate kind of thing that's locked 24/7 unless the king lets someone come in. It's dishonoring. It was dishonoring in that culture, at that time, for someone to just stand in front of the gate if they weren't invited by the king. It just was completely dishonoring in that time. It was like, dude, what are you doing? Do you have a death sentence? So Mordecai had bananas. He was like, nope, we're gonna die anyways. I'm gonna stand before the gate, and I'm just gonna stand here and weep for my people, because he's like, if no one's gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. So Esther finds out that her cousin Mordecai is wearing sackcloth, laying on the ground, weeping for the Jewish people. And she sends her eunuch, which is a guy who serves the king, but she had her own personal eunuch who served her as queen. And this guy was committed to serve and to do whatever is asked. So Esther sends her pretty much her slave, sends her slave to Mordecai, and Mordecai's like, yo, he's like, this is what's happening. Haman put a decree, and the king said yes to it, that all the Jews are going to die. We're Jews, and if we don't do anything about it, we're going to die. Now, you may be wondering, like, why? Who cares? Who cares about the Jews? People die every time, every generation, people die. Well, to get a full context of the story and the big picture behind the book of Esther and any other book in the Bible, is that you want to know this in the Old Testament, is that God, before the foundations of the world, chose Jerusalem, which is a country, to choose the Jews, the people of that country, to be his chosen people. Now, that was God's plan from the beginning, and that's why if you read the Bible, you see so many times where the Jewish people, God blessed them. He blessed their nation. He helped them win battles with bad guys who tried to kill them and destroy their lineage and their families, but God was there for their rescue. So the Jews are important. Why? Because if there wasn't a chosen people, then we wouldn't know who God really was. God displayed his nature, his heart to the Jewish people. So now that we have Christ Jesus in our lives, and now that Christ did die, we can become his chosen people. So he showed his nature to the Jewish people, but God's original plan was to wait until the time of Jesus to come on earth, to take our place as sinners, take our place as people who sinned and committed sin against God, and to die on the cross so that we can become chosen people. So we can become God's chosen people. So now, the Jewish people, yes, they're still in God's heart today, but so are we. So it used to be Jews were only chosen, other people who are like heathens like us, or Gentiles, can't be part of God's story. There's only a few people in the Old Testament that weren't Jews that God actually blessed and saved their life. Only a few. But it's because of their faith. But now we can have faith in Jesus, and we become part of God's story. We become part of the big picture. So it's no longer Jews now, it's all of us. And so continue back to the story. So Mordecai tells Haman, or tells the slave of Esther, hey, this is what's happening. If we don't do anything, we're going to die. Now Esther thinks about it, and she says, well, if we're going to die, then what's this have to do with me? She sends back the slave, and Mordecai says, yo, what if you just stop thinking about yourself for this one moment, and think about the people of Israel. Think about God's chosen people. What if you were placed in this kingdom for such a time as this? Because God knew that you were going to be a queen of that king who signed a decree that all Jews are going to die. What if God knew from the beginning that you were going to be a queen and you were going to save God's chosen people? That you're going to be a redeemer for God's chosen people because of your faith, because of your bravery, because you said yes to God's call. Esther was like, wow, Mordecai, you're right. She's like, Mordecai, you're right. This is what I'm going to do. Me and my girls, we're going to fast for 3 days. We're not going to eat anything. We're not going to drink anything. We're going to pray and fast for 3 days. And she said, I want you and the people of Israel, the chosen people of God, to fast for 3 days. And I have a plan. So they all do their fasting. They pray, they fast, they don't eat or drink anything for 3 days. And then Esther has the bravery to go to the king when the king never requested her. Like I said in the story, in the video, if you weren't requested by the king, you're going to die. They're going to chop your head off. They're going to hang you, and they're going to just do torture. They're going to torture you. You're going to die. That's how bad it was. Because if the king doesn't want you there, he doesn't want you there. That's how plain and simple it was. So Esther goes to the gate, and she asks for the king, and the king was pleased to see her. Now, I think that was God. I think God changed his heart, because even if the king did not want Esther there, I believe that God changed his heart in order to welcome Esther in and say, wow, that's my beautiful wife. That's the woman. That's my woman. And he welcomed her in the gate. And Esther came to the king and said, hey, I want to prepare a table. I want to prepare dinner for you and for Haman. And at that time, Haman was there. Haman had so much pride. Oh my goodness. Haman was so prideful. He went after that meeting, goes home and tells his wife and his friends, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. The king is allowing me to kill all the Jews to his family. He's like, not only that, the queen is inviting me, personally to be part of the dinner for the king. I'm going to be part of that. She didn't just invite the king, she invited me too. And so Haman was super excited. He was super pumped. He's like, we're going to kill the Jews. I'm going to be the king's best man because of what I did. and I'm invited to the party that the queen is setting up. And so Haman's like all excited, getting rowdy. And then the king during this time was thinking about Mordecai. Why? Does anyone know why? What did the story say? What did Mordecai do? Save the king's life. Yes. Mordecai saved the king's life. How?
The soldiers wanted to kill him.
Bing. Bingo. Yep. The soldiers were plotting to kill the king, and Mordecai overheard and saved his life. Now, the king, during this time, so imagine, there's Haman celebrating about all his achievements and how the king is blessing him and pouring just blessings over his life. And he's like sitting chilling like, yeah. He's probably getting high or something. I'm just kidding. They probably didn't smoke. But he's like celebrating. He's drinking or whatever. And here's the king sitting in his castle. And he's like, He's like, hey, he tells his slaves or the scribes or Pharisees, hey, read me the decrees. Read me the stories of our nation. Read me the things that happen, the good things that happen to us. And as a slave is reading all the stuff that happened, the chronicles and everything that happened in their nation, he stumbles across Mordecai's story and how Mordecai saved his life. During this time, the king was like, oh my goodness. He asked the slave guy, he's like, did we celebrate Mordecai? Did we do anything for him? Or did we do anything? The slave's like, no, we didn't do anything. He just saved your life, but we didn't do anything. We didn't celebrate him or anything. So at this time, imagine, so Haman's all excited, he's pumped. He walks into the gate, into the king's castle, and says, and the king heard that Haman is inside his castle. So the king tells the slave, hey, is that Haman? Oh, go get Haman. Bring him up here. So Haman comes up to the king, and Haman's like, what's up, king? And the king's like, well, what would you do for a man who is highly honorable? What would you do to a person who is worthy to be praised? And Haman's like, he's thinking about himself. He's like, oh, that's me. He's talking about me right now. And so Haman's like, oh, okay. Well, first thing I want you to do, I want to, not him, but the first thing I do, Haman said, he's like, the robes that you wear as a king, as to show your royalty, I give that robe to the person. What else I do? The horse that you rode, that warrior horse that is no other in all the lands, I let that person ride that horse. Oh, you know what else? You know the crown you're wearing right now too? I put that crown on that person's head. And Haman's thinking, this is him. He's envisioning himself. He's like, this is me. This is who I'm going to be. The king's going to honor me. This is me. This is my day to shine. And the king said, well, everything you just said, do it at once for Mordecai. Now, you can imagine. Imagine you just he was on top of the world. All of a sudden, he just got crushed like an ant. He's like, what? If you ever got scared or something, or something hit you and you're just kind of shocked and you freeze inside, you're just not even sure how to respond. That's how Haman was. He was just out of it. And so what happened after that was Haman did everything to Mordecai. He found Mordecai, and Mordecai was still in front of the gate with sackcloth. Mordecai put the stuff, or Haman put the king's robes, the crown, everything, the ring, everything, and the horse, and he gave it all to Mordecai, and they rode through the city declaring that this guy is worthy to be praised because he saved the king. Afterwards, what happened, Haman goes back home and starts crying to his family. He says he weeps as he went back home because he just got crushed. His pride just got crushed. He's like, man. He's like, I was on top of the world. Now the king is honoring someone else. So he got really butthurt. And so, he was still like, man, well, I wasn't honored, but God's still going to honor me. I mean, not God, but the king's still going to honor me because Esther invited me to the banquet. I'm still going to show up to there. So he ended up going to the banquet anyways, and Mordecai was invited as well. And so they all sat in the banquet, and Esther, as they were sitting, the king, like I said in the little video, the king asked Esther and said, I will give you up to half my kingdom. What would you like from me? And Esther at first said, I want the man, she didn't name names, she said, I want the man whose plot to kill my people to be dead, to be executed. And the king was furious. He's like, who's plotting to kill your people? And Haman, imagine, Haman's like right next to the king. And Esther says, that man! Yeah, I know, right? So Haman turned completely pale. Imagine Haman just pale. Like he knows. Like imagine him like loosening up his shirt and everything. Like, oh damn, he's sweating. Yeah. He's like, it's done. It's done for it. So he built. You know if you see movies to hang people, he built that thing.
Put it around their neck.
Yep.
Rope and hold them up.
He built that one thing for Mordecai. You know, it bit him back. His plot, because he built that, but he got it. So the king said, well, you know that thing that they built? The king found out that he built this hanger thing for Mordecai. He was like, nope, we're going to use that for Haman. Hanging. Mordecai gets hung. Haman gets hung. And Mordecai survives and he becomes amazing. But Haman dies because of his pride. Now, biggest thing I want to zoom back into is Mordecai. Mordecai was praised. God saw his humility. God saw his hunger to save his people. God saw his honor, like God honored him because he wanted to save his people. If Mordecai never did what he did and Esther didn't do what she did, we wouldn't have about half the books in the Bible, the Old Testament. Because there would be no more God stories to fulfill. Maybe God will use a different nation, but that's not God's heart. He really loved the Jews. But he always knew that he was going to send his son. So God knew that it wasn't time to send his son. Because he wanted all nations to be saved when his son comes. Because at that time, there was only a few nations. But 2,000 years later, there's a few billion more people. And that God knew he wanted to save as many people as possible. And so he sent his son. Now imagine this. I just want to honor Mordecai. Mordecai's on the ground weeping, on sackcloth. He's laying down and he's crying like this. I'd imagine he's like just spread across. And he's crying. He's saying, God, help me. He's like, God, help our nation. God, save us from this death. Save me. Save Esther. Save this whole thing. Stop this thing. Stop the death of your people. And you know what God did? God came to the rescue and spoke to Esther and said, Esther, this is the time. He spoke through Mordecai. Who has people in their life, going back to what Mark said last week, there are people in our life that influence us. Now, can any of you, by raise of hand, relate when someone that is maybe influential in your life says something to you and it speaks to you? It speaks to you. Like Mordecai said, Esther, if you're not going to go, our people are going to die. You were born for such a time as this. That encouragement, that simple word, you were born for such a time as this. You're placed in the kingdom and you are placed as queen for a time like this to save your people. Who's ever had someone like that? Speak a simple word of encouragement. And it kind of spoke to you. You're like, wow, that relates. Like, maybe I don't see it now, but I know it touched me in the deepest part of my heart. And if you haven't, I want to let you know that you were born for such a time as this. It's not a mistake that you're here right now, 2017, that you're here right now at Crossroads, that you're here right now listening to me preach, that you're right here tonight on a Wednesday night in October on a rainy day Because God has a plan for you. Because God knew that you're going to be here, and maybe for some of you, this is just preparation. Maybe you're learning a lot from youth group. Maybe you're called into missions. Maybe you're called to pastor. Maybe you're called to be in business. Maybe you're called to change the world in the environment that you're called to be in. Maybe this is just a stepping stone for you. Maybe you're here because God wants to teach you something so that when you turn 20, 30 years old, you're going to be like, wow, I learned so much skills in this environment. Now I can take it to this place. And now I can bring influence and change. I'm going to close with this Bible verse. It's in Jeremiah 33:3. And I know this is going to touch some of you guys, and I want you guys to take it to heart because I know it's going to really be impactful for some of you, and it's going to open your eyes. So Jeremiah 33:3 says this: "Call to me." This is referring to God, us. We should call. "Call to me, and I will answer you, and will tell you great and hidden things that you have not known." Who wants to know your purpose?
I do.
Who wants to know their destiny?
I do.
Come on, that's right. In every human being, every person in this room, you all have a desire and a drive to know what you're called to do. What the heck am I called to do? Why am I in the season? Why is it hard sometimes? Why does my life suck sometimes? It's because you're called for such a time as this. There's something that God wants to reveal to you. The only way that God will reveal it to you is if you call to Him. Just as Mordecai called to God. Just as Mordecai cried and prayed. And just as Esther took that step of faith, said, nope, even if I die in the king's palace, in the king's gates, because he doesn't want me to be there, I'm still going to do it. Because it's either me or the people my people who are going to suffer and die. She's like, I'd take that place. She took that place. So, I want y'all to be stirred tonight and to call out to God. If there is something in your life, in your heart, that you have not seen yet, or you want to know, you want clarity, I want you to call out to God. Now, if you don't know what that means and what that looks like, you can ask any of us leaders. You can ask people who you see that live for Jesus, and that already call out to God, but you just don't know how it looks like. Find someone that influences you. Find someone that speaks to your heart. When you talk to them, you're like, man, I want to know that. Because unless you learn how to call out to God, you won't know the hidden things and the things unknown. It's a fact. You're gonna go, maybe you'll walk step by step, but if you want to know what you're doing here on earth, you need to call out to God. He's going to reveal the plans and your future for you. He's going to reveal things that you have no clue about. That's my challenge. Call out to God. And if you don't know how to, ask one of us leaders. But call out to God if you want to know the hidden secret things that's on God's heart and on God's agenda. But let me tell you, once you find out, sometimes it can be scary because you're scared of letting things go. But trust me, the more you wait, the more you're going to suffer because you're not called to do what you think you're called to do until God reveals it to you. Because God has a specific call for people. And some people don't find it until they're 40, 50, 60. If you want to find it now, this is a good opportunity while you're young. I'm still pursuing it. I have little bits and pieces, but I want to know the big picture. So I call out to God because I want to know it. I want to hear His heart. I want to hear His voice. And I want to know it.
You have just been listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.